He's dead, the Berlin truck attacker, but he was 2 countries away from where he killed and injured so many. Shot dead by this trainee policeman in Milan after he'd already opened fire on the police patrol. Good evening. The manhunt is over, but the wounds from his terrorist action remain open and deep in Germany tonight. 12 people dead, dozens more injured, and the role of German security and safeguarding systems under close scrutiny. And the global temperature raised by such incidents not lessened by the arrest on the other side of the world of 5 men suspected of planning a series of Christmas Day bomb attacks in Melbourne, Australia. And in Malta, a return to the more traditional terrorism, this time a Libyan airliner hijacked by a pro-Gaddafi Libyan group to Malta.
Also tonight, the bromance between Trump and Putin has gone nuclear. After Trump tweeted yesterday that he would win any nuclear arms race, Putin said today that he would beat any aggressor. Happy New Year. The siege of Aleppo may be over, but without the memorable images provided for us by camerawoman Waad Al-Khatib, we would not have been able to tell that story. Tonight, she and her family are out, and she tells her story. And Brits famously love animals more than people, which probably means that we should value vets more than doctors. Now, post-Brexit, the profession is begging the Prime Minister to protect the large number of European vets looking after our animals.
Also tonight, a report from the homeless action group Crisis stating that 8 in 10 homeless people have been attacked or abused in the last year. We hear about the added Christmas horrors suffered by the homeless on our streets.
And if people feel that you have no value and they've had a drink, and I suppose there's more intoxicated people around at Christmas, and therefore the people that they feel is of no value, they're more likely to abuse.
It was certainly the news Germany was waiting for, but not perhaps the way the authorities wanted to hear it. At 3 o'clock this morning, the man believed responsible for the Berlin truck attack was shot dead by police in Milan. Quite how Anis Amri actually made it across Germany, France and northern Italy while Europe's security agencies were on the sharpest lookout for him is still unclear. Like so many aspects of this troubling case, there are more questions than answers, as Simon Israel now reports.
In the early hours of the morning, Europe's most urgent manhunt ended in a suburb of Milan. The body of 24-year-old Anis Amri lies beneath the gold-coloured sheet. The ISIS recruit was shot dead after opening fire on a patrol which was carrying out a routine check.
Questa notte alle 3 del mattino,
during a normal operation, a state police patrol stopped a person who was acting suspiciously. At that moment, the man got hold of a gun from his rucksack and without hesitation fired at the officer who'd asked for ID documents.
The hero of the hour is this young trainee officer, Luca Scatta, who'd been in the service for less than a year. The rookie opened fire after his colleague, Christian Movio, took a bullet in the shoulder and is now recovering in hospital. Within hours of Amri's death, ISIS released what appears to be a mobile phone recorded suicide video, shot recently. When and where is not confirmed, but in it he declares allegiance to ISIS and says he's come to slaughter. His death doesn't end the investigation into the market carnage, which left 12 people dead and 49 injured. Possible accomplices and his escape are major priorities. In the 3 days after Amri drove the 20-ton truck into the Christmas market, he had travelled 1,000 miles through 3 countries, from Berlin to Chambéry in France, reportedly by train, then on to Turin and finally to Milan, possibly retracing the route the jihadist had ventured on when he arrived from Tunisia back in 2011. He posed as a Syrian refugee, but his asylum application was rejected. He should have been deported, but Amri's use of multiple identities confused the authorities back in Tunisia. Europe's open borders are being blamed by right-wing politicians for the attack and the escape, as well as Angela Merkel's open-door policy on refugees. It's a view shared by some relatives of Amri's victims who gathered at the scene today.
Thank you, Mrs. Merkel. I will never vote for her again, and I hope none of my friends or family will either.
The German Chancellor today went into the stable door business and declared she would speed up deportations of failed asylum seekers to Tunisia.
Our democracy, our rule of law, our values and our humanity are the alternative to terrorist hatred. They will be stronger than terrorism.
But she also ordered a security review, for the measures in place have clearly not been strong enough.
Simon Israel reporting. Well, police in Australia say that they foiled plans to launch a series of bomb attacks in Melbourne, possibly on Christmas Day. They believe the plot was inspired by the Islamic State group. Several homes in the city were raided overnight. 7 people were arrested. 4 have now been charged with terror offences. Police believe the plan was to attack Melbourne's Central Square, its main train station and the cathedral with explosives, knives and a gun. The Prime Minister described it as one of the most substantial terrorist plots of the last several years.
Well, now, a little earlier I spoke to Richard Barrett, a former director of global counterterrorism at MI6 and currently director of the Global Strategy Network. And I started by asking him if ISIS was on the wane.
In territorial terms, it is on the wane, and of course it founds its idea of the caliphate on having territory. It's a very important part of the concept of the caliphate. So losing territories obviously has to be explained in some ways, and explained as being, well, you know, it's all going to happen, but not quite yet. Having attacks elsewhere in Europe, particularly in the Western countries, what they call the Crusader Alliance, does show their supporters that we're still alive, we're still going. And as their late spokesman, Abu Muhammad al-Adnani, said, it doesn't matter if we lose territory because we'll just go back into the desert, and so long as there's the idea and you don't defeat the idea, we'll always be strong. So
what does Germany tell us about how Europe in particular, perhaps the West in general, is able to resist this group?
Yeah, I mean, it shows you the size of the problem, doesn't it? And that you have so many people swilling around, sort of, maybe they've come to police attention, as very many have, in a sort of minor criminal way, but not necessarily in this sort of violent extremist way. And so suddenly when one pops up, you can look back with hindsight and say, oh, yeah, there are all these indicators, we should have spotted that. But there's so many people to look at that this becomes very difficult indeed. And, of course, we shouldn't forget that many plots are disrupted.
Are we to live with this sort of level of terrorist activity, or do you believe it can be rolled back to nothing?
I don't think it can ever be rolled back to nothing, no. I would agree with you there. But it's peaked during 2016, particularly during these last months of 2016, and I think it will carry on into 2017. After all, we've had all the Europeans and others who've gone to fight in Syria with the Islamic State, many of whom have now returned, and others probably will return if they can escape from Raqqa and Mosul. You know, these people will be around, and of course many other people who didn't go to Syria and Iraq but might have wanted to, and others who sympathise with them.
The thing people are really beginning to think about now is the rest of the architecture under the Trump-Putin liaison, if you like. Is that seen as something which will improve global security or damage it?
Well, I think the Russian approach to terrorism has been suppressive, hasn't it? The Russian idea has been to, you kill as many as possible. If you can't kill them, you try and round them up as quickly as possible too, and you bang the lid back on the pot. We're not sure that that works. I'm not sure it's worked completely in Russia, and certainly we don't believe it would work in other countries, even if it were possible to do that. Trump getting cozy with Putin may result in a more geopolitical approach to security issues in dealing with Syria or something in short terms, but in the longer-term terrorist threat, I don't think that's going to help particularly. I don't think Russia can offer the United States or other Western countries very much useful intelligence on the terrorist threat over here.
You have strong contacts in this particular world of security, and I'm wondering how the security professionals view this extraordinary turn of events between Russia and the United States.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of anxiety about it. After all, I think Alex Younger, the head of the Secret Intelligence Service, said the other day that the two threats were really cyber and Russia. And Russia remains a threat to our Western democracies, and we have to bear that in mind, of course. But the politics between the United States and Russia is enormously important for the rest of our security. You know, that has to be got right. And if the Trump-Putin alliance, if it emerges as such, can increase our general security, we should all be very happy. But, of course, I think the security officials, like officials and non-officials, are quite concerned about where all this may be going.
Richard Barrett, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Well, the danse macabre between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin continues after Trump's tweets and comments about America winning any nuclear arms race. The Russian president responded in kind, saying his country was stronger than any potential aggressor. Whatever happened to their bromance? And Putin's annual end-of-year address in Moscow came as his armed forces continue to play a pivotal role in the Syrian civil war. As our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, now reports.
A cold coming, they had of it. Some 200 families evacuated from East Aleppo. As the military storm abated, winter has vented its fury.
These tents aren't suited to the winter. They are for the summer. It's miserable. The wind blew some of the tents away.
And here's the man who saved Aleppo, liberated the East Aleppans from the clutches of the jihadis, or so says Moscow. President Putin outlining coming peace talks in which Europe and the US have no place at all.
We proposed the Kazakh capital Astana as a neutral venue. The president of Turkey agreed to that, the president of Iran and President Assad also.
On the ground in Syria, he rammed the point home. The West is the problem, not the solution. Moscow and our allies and Turkey cleared the jihadis from Aleppo, he said. The West was, is and shall be nowhere in this.
This is the largest humanitarian action in the modern world. It couldn't have happened without the active work of the presidents of Turkey and Iran and our very active involvement. But of course, it couldn't have happened without the goodwill of the president of Syria, Mr. Assad.
Today, Putin and Assad spoke by phone. Assad thanking Putin for being an ally over Aleppo. Putin praising Assad for retaking the city. They bring signs to try and get his attention. 1,400 journalists for this annual Putin press-a-thon, almost 4 hours of taking questions. A key message, Russia, the global superpower, is restored.
The Russian Federation today is stronger than any potential aggressor. This is very important. And it is no accident that I use the word aggressor. Who is an aggressor? Someone who can potentially attack the Russian Federation, and we are stronger than any potential aggressor.
Presumably including the potential aggressor, whose potential president yesterday tweeted this: "The US must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes." Today, the Trump team released a warm letter said to be from Putin to Trump, dated a whole week before that tweet. Putin writes about hoping to cooperate internationally at a new level amid serious challenges. Nonetheless, it seems Trump went right ahead with his nuclear expansion tweet yesterday, and today offered a US TV Christmas show the following observation.
Mika asked the president-elect, while we had the opportunity, what his position was on trying to clarify the tweet yesterday regarding the nuclear arsenal, and the president-elect told you what?
Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass.
And outlast them all.
And outlast them all.
All right, you can put that down as breaking news.
There you go.
Back in Syria, in Aleppo, they know all about superpower self-confidence and what even a conventional arsenal may do. So as we deck the halls with boughs of holly, in Aleppo this Christmas, any greenery will suffice to cheer the rubble that was once a church.
Alex Thompson reporting. Now, over the last year, Channel 4 News has broadcast the images of camerawoman Waad al-Khatib as she documented the plight of people trapped inside rebel-held East Aleppo. At 25 and 5 months pregnant with a 1-year-old child, she and her family are among the last to be evacuated out of the besieged area and are now taking refuge inside Idlib province, alongside thousands of others who made it out. Waad's films captured the horror of lives lived under constant bombardment. The moment a newborn baby cries for the first time. after a barrel bomb almost kills his pregnant mother. 3 brothers playing at a friend's house when a bomb hits, killing Mohammed and destroying the lives of the siblings he leaves behind. And in Aleppo's final days, the baby is so traumatized she is unable even to cry. Well, Waad recorded her evacuation from Aleppo, and a short while ago we spoke to her and asked her about her journey.
Here's some rebels. We were 3 days on the border before we cross the border or the regime area. There are some children. We were so afraid that maybe the regime will break the deal and we will be sieged again in the city. It was so cold. It was snowing and raining all the day. There's no food, there's no water, no electricity. We find a damaged building and we prepare it. We burn some sticks and some woods to warm, and we find some foods and make breads with our hands.
It's 4 p.m. We are waiting for the evacuation since 6 a.m. in the morning. It's 2 a.m. after midnight. We are so close to the checkpoint of the regime.
There was a Russian soldiers. Actually, we don't know what were they talking about, but it was in a foreign language. We don't understand anything. We was afraid of the arrest by the regime, and I was so afraid of the regime maybe would break the deal, like what's happening many times. Maybe we will be killed or arrested again by the regime. When we arrived, I feel like I'm in a dream and the nightmare will finish, and now we are in a safe place. The snow on all this ground make me happy and make me feeling a peace. It was so hard decision to leave, and we are forced to flee. It was our lovely city, it was our dreams and our country. We don't know anything about the future. We are in a strange place. What will we do?
The voice and pictures of Waab al-Khatib.
2 men have been convicted of using Syrian aid convoys to smuggle money to extremists. The court heard that Saeed Hoque sent £4,500 to his nephew, who was fighting with an al-Qaeda-linked group in Syria. His so-called fixer, Mashoud Mia, was convicted on 1 count of funding terrorism. The Old Bailey heard that the convoys had become unwitting vehicles for funds and supplies used in the planning of terrorist attacks.
President Obama is expected not to veto a UN Security Council resolution demanding an end to Israeli settlement building on occupied land claimed by the Palestinians. In a sharp break from recent US policy on resolutions concerning Israel, the Obama administration is expected to abstain from the UN vote taking place within the next hour. The president, who has had a difficult relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has long made clear his opposition to Israeli settlement building. We'll bring you a result of that vote if it happens before we go off air. Matt.
Now then, another prison riot, another inquiry. The latest disturbance, the 5th incident in an English jail in the last 2 months, came at HMP Swaleside on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent. Around 60 inmates took control of part of a wing, and riot-trained tornado squads were once again deployed to restore order. How rotten is the state of our prisons? Paul McNamara reports.
It's becoming a familiar sight across the country. Reinforcements striding into a prison out of control. Last night it was HMP Swaleside on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent in need of backup. 60 inmates running riot on one landing of this 8-wing Category B prison. And familiar too now, the scenes apparently from inside the eye of the storm, filmed by a prisoner himself on a mobile phone he shouldn't have.
No face, no case, no face, no case.
This all started at 7 p.m. last night, but warning signs have been there for months. An HM Inspectorate report in July called the prison dangerous, said levels of violence were too high, and said staffing issues meant there were troubles running a purposeful regime. These lords of Orday-Survey appear to agree. By 1 a.m. this morning, the riot was over and the prisoners were back in their cells. But the problems facing the prison system extend far beyond one 5-hour skirmish here and whatever damage might have been caused. This is the 5th incident like this at an English prison in just under 2 months. So the question now is this a system in crisis? Before Swaleside, there was trouble at Lewes Prison in East Sussex in October. That was followed by disorder at Moorland in South Yorkshire, and a riot at Bedford Prison where inmates took over 2 wings. And just last week, more than 200 inmates rioted at Birmingham Prison. The bill for that, around £2 million.
The worst case scenario is we fall into real heavy rioting around the estate. So if it was to go off at more than one jail at the same time, that would be very difficult to manage. So prisoners communicating via mobile phone, organising amongst themselves to create havoc in a few jails at once could really see the system in dire chaos.
Live footage, man, a riot in HMP Birmingham,
How have riots like this one in Birmingham last week become so prolific? Why are so-called tornado team riot squads so needed right now? Well, unions blame the cuts to prison officer numbers, the low pay and the extreme overcrowding in jails. In the last 20 years alone, the prison population has nearly doubled to more than 85,000. Labour say it's time to stop sending so many to jail.
Politicians from across the aisle have now got to wake up to a crisis that has been brewing certainly since 2010, when prison officer numbers were cut, but possibly much longer than that, possibly my whole adult lifetime, and the arms race between the two main parties on who would lock up more people.
That message only enraging some of her own MPs for turning their back on Tony Blair's once lauded claim of tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. Today, the government said the challenges to prisons won't be solved overnight, but they are committed to wholesale reforms. How many more scenes like this will be filmed, though, and how many more millions of pounds of damage done before that reform is delivered?
And some breaking news. The UN Security Council, we saw a moment ago, has passed a resolution demanding an end to Israeli settlement building on occupied Palestinian territories, with the US abstaining.
A plane making an internal flight in Libya was today forced to land in Malta after being hijacked by 2 men armed with a hand grenade and a pistol, which turned out to be fakes. All passengers and crew were released unharmed. The perpetrators used the incident simply as a PR stunt to launch a new political party affiliated to the former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. They have been arrested and are being investigated by Maltese authorities. Jane Death has this report.
An ordinary-looking landing at Malta Airport. But this was a plane taken hostage. The troubles of a country which has been off the world's radar this year, Libya, had come to Europe's door. The aircraft sat on the runway for 4 hours, with reports there were 2 hijackers with a grenade threatening to blow the plane up. The domestic flight took off from Sabha in the southwest for the hour's flight to Tripoli. On board, 111 passengers and 7 crew. The pilot told Tripoli Airport Control the plane was being hijacked before communication was lost. The pilot apparently tried to land in Libya, but the hijackers refused, forcing the plane to divert to Malta International Airport. What were the hijackers' demands? It wasn't clear until one of them, a 20-something Libyan called Musa Shaha, rang a TV station. He was launching a new political party, Al-Fatah al-Jadid, or New Conquest. Al-Fatah is the name one Colonel Gaddafi gave the coup that brought him to power.
As a leader of the new Al-Fatah party, I say we managed to make the party known to the world through the hijacking of the airplane, and thank God the passengers left in good health with the crew. We wanted to promote and declare the birth of our new party and our main demand, which is direct elections in Libya.
It's one way to launch a political party. Here is hijacker Musa Shaha waving the old Libyan flag, the one from the Gaddafi era.
Hijackers were told that in order for any discussions to be entertained, they should release all passengers first. This request was negotiated and eventually accepted.
Rolling news coverage achieved, the plane door opened, and in groups all the passengers and then the crew were released. Then the hijackers surrendered themselves and their weapons, a grenade and 2 pistols, all apparently fake. There are many Gaddafi loyalists in Libya still, 5 years after he was toppled and killed with the help of the West. But the unity government feels like empty words while armed militias, including Islamic State, fight for power. And the men in these recent pictures in the Gaddafi green headbands are his former officers and security services, claiming they're taking back the second city, Benghazi. The hijacking today had a peaceful ending. Libya's uprising has not.
Deutsche Bank and Credit Suisse have agreed multi-billion-dollar settlements with US authorities over the sale of toxic mortgage bonds in the run-up to the 2008 financial crisis. Credit Suisse agreed to a $5.3 billion deal, while Deutsche Bank will pay $7.2 billion to settle claims that they missold mortgage-backed securities. The deals, which include compensation for customers, are part of a long-running investigation by the US Department of Justice. Now, one sector which is anxiously waiting to learn how it will be affected by Brexit is the veterinary profession. Vets trained in the other EU states make up a significant proportion of those working in the UK, especially in roles related to public health. But the British Veterinary Association has warned that the uncertainty about what will happen to immigration rules after Britain leaves the EU is already affecting recruitment. Our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davis has the story.
This is Charlotte. She's 28, from Belgium, part of a small army of vets from the continent upon which this UK industry has grown increasingly reliant. She moved here a few years ago and now works for a large animal practice in Dursley in Gloucestershire. Enjoying it?
Yes, very much, yeah. Lovely country, lovely countryside, lovely people. Yeah, enjoying it very much.
Do you want to stay?
Yeah, I have no immediate plans to go back. Maybe in the faraway future I would go back, but no immediate plans at all.
Do you think you're going to be allowed to stay after the UK leaves the European Union?
I hope so. I try not to worry about it at all, actually. We'll see what happens.
Over the years, the British veterinary scene has developed a distinctly European look. In Charlotte's practice, we met Martin from the Netherlands, Vlad, a recent arrival from Romania. 13 vets work here, 8 different nationalities. In fact, of the 23,000 vets currently in the UK, nearly 6,000 graduated from other EU states. In recent years, more than half of newly registered vets have come from outside the UK, and the vast majority of those from other EU countries, 200 from Spain in 1 year alone.
Why do you employ vets from outside the UK? Are there just not enough here?
The primary reason is I haven't been able to source vets within the UK willing to do the job.
Matthew Pugh has a practice in Hereford. Of his 14 vets, 1 is Spanish, 1 Bulgarian, and 3, like Ovidiu, are Romanian.
I think we have to advise them.
His job, testing mostly for bovine tuberculosis. The government won't yet guarantee residency rights of EU citizens currently in the UK post-Brexit, until similar assurances for Britons in other EU countries are given. But this ongoing uncertainty is proving deeply unsettling at this practice for both employer and employee.
I desperately need to know what's ahead of me. I desperately need to know that I can continue to recruit vets from the EU, and more importantly, hopefully, I can continue to employ the vets I've got currently employed.
So your message to the Prime Minister?
Well, Mrs. May, tell us what's going to happen with us, and we need to hear some plans about that, to know how to plan our lives. It's very stressful to live like that, to thinking what's going to happen tomorrow with me. Do I still have the right to be here or not? That's not a life, and it's not fair, because we are doing a very good jobs and very difficult jobs, actually, in this country.
When Ovidiu first came to the UK, he worked as a vet in an abattoir, checking that the animals were fit for slaughter and the meat thereafter was fit for consumption. There are vets across the UK working in critical public health roles like this. And what's startling is that according to the British Veterinary Association, in the UK meat hygiene sector, more than 90% of the vets are thought to have graduated overseas. The Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons and British Veterinary Association are so concerned, they wrote recently to the Prime Minister, warning that any immigration restrictions in their area could have a profound impact. Even before Article 50 is triggered, we're experiencing a negative impact on the existing veterinary workforce, they said, adding, those involved in public health critical roles are having increasing difficulty recruiting much-needed EU veterinary surgeons.
You're always a bit nervous with his previous history.
John Blackwell has experienced that firsthand. Earlier this year, he recruited a Croatian vet who'd been living in Ireland into his clinical practice in Shropshire. It was before the referendum.
Everything was going swimmingly. He was married, his wife and young son were working in Ireland, and the idea was that once he'd finished his schooling, the young son, he was going to come over and the family were going to move and put down the roots. And then, of course, we had the Brexit vote, and I was surprised, but it totally destabilised him.
The Croatian vet turned down the job and went back to Ireland. Numerous vets are now reporting difficulties recruiting, we were told. If you were back in Belgium now, looking to move abroad to work for the first time, would you choose the UK as a potential destination?
Probably not, because I would be worried that the UK is not a very welcoming country. I know that's not true because I live here now and everyone's very nice and always been very welcoming. But if I didn't know the UK very well, I'd be very worried to come over here.
And that is one reason why some employers here are so worried. Charlotte remains optimistic her status will be assured. And today the government said the Prime Minister has been clear she wants to protect the status of EU nationals already living here. But this is an industry, like others, where clarity on Brexit seemingly can't come soon enough.
Andy Davis reporting. Now, a former Conservative minister was once quoted as saying, "The homeless are what you step over when you come out of the opera." But it seems too many people are not even that considerate. The Charity Crisis says that almost 8 in 10 homeless people have suffered some sort of violence or abuse in the past year, with the majority of rough sleepers saying life on the street is getting worse. We've been speaking to 2 former homeless men about the abuse they experienced and why the Christmas period can often be the very worst time of year.
Being homeless for some people means that you have no value. And if people feel that you have no value and they've had a drink, then you can be victim to some abusive situations. And I suppose there's more intoxicated people around at Christmas, and therefore the people that they feel is of no value, they are more likely to abuse. My name's Corky, and I was homeless for approximately 5 years.
Yeah, Christmas is it's the hardest time of year. You think of people being inside, being warm, because it's a time of unity and you're out there by yourself. My name's Carlos Blanco and I was homeless for around a year.
It wasn't a gradual process. It was a dichotomy. One minute I was in a good job, living a comfortable life, and then one day I separated from my ex-wife, and she had the house and stuff, and at first I stayed at an internet cafe, and I was kind of like in denial, and I realised I was homeless. I had nowhere to go.
At first it was a bit of a shock. I originally went to my council, who turned me away because I was not deemed as vulnerable, and because it was winter time as well, it was all a bit daunting, a bit scary.
Well, I spent 5 years on the trains, and I could have spent anything up to 8 hours a day on a train. I would always wear a suit, and it was like my camouflage. Because when anybody asked me what I was doing, I'd say, oh, I was on my way to work and I fell asleep.
This is where I was staying for a few days. So me and my friend were sort of sat in this corner. He suffered quite a lot of abuse on the street. Just before Christmas, he actually got his face cut. We sort of cut him here, like right across his mouth. He had to have stitches and stuff like that.
And I remember one day I got into an argument, a petty argument with this guy on the road. He was quite rude to me, and he punched me in the side of my head. I'll never forget that. You believe that the world is a mirror image of yourself. If you are a person who doesn't like violence, who wants to kind of live a peaceful life and just and treat people as he would like to be treated, because you're of that mentality, you assume everybody else is. And in that moment, I realised, actually, no.
It's the look and the fact that you are lying on the street and things like that. They classify you as dirty, and it's horrible. And you see people walking past with like lots of presents and things like that, and you think, well, you know, even if you had like a sleeping bag or a blanket or something like that, it does make it really difficult. If anything, it just makes me angry that people don't take a second to understand.
It's disturbing that in this, what we'd call developed country, that we have people that are of such a mentality that they feel it's okay to abuse the vulnerable. And I think it's disgusting, isn't it, really? I mean, I don't know how else I could put it into any terms. It is disgusting, it's abhorrent, and it's unacceptable.
Two-time Wimbledon champion Petra Kvitova says she can move the fingers on her left hand again following surgery for injuries suffered in an attack in her own home. The Czech tennis player was wounded by a knife-wielding intruder on Tuesday and needed 4 hours of surgery on her hand. Tendons in all 4 of her fingers and her thumb were damaged, as well as 2 nerves.
Yesterday morning, during a session with the doctor, I was able to move the fingers on my left hand, which I think was the biggest gift I could have, to feel the fingers. And this was the greatest Christmas present I could have wished for.
Now, it's been the year in which the gloves have come off and old assumptions have been shredded like confetti. From celebrity deaths to worldwide terrorism, from Aleppo to Donald Trump, from Brexit to Black Lives Matter. Few would have predicted last December the way that 2016 has turned out. In a moment, we'll be debating the whys and wherefores and the what next. But first, here's a quick reminder of the events of the last 12 months. Buckle up.
I'm so bad I make medicine sick. I'm so fast, man, I can run through a hurricane and don't get wet. I can drown a drink of water and kill a dead tree. Wait till you see Muhammad Ali.
Something happened on the day he died. Spirit rose a meter and stepped aside. Somebody else took his place and bravely cried.
That we are going to leave this union on June the 23rd, and so I'm going out now. I may be some time.
I know when to go out, know when to stay in, get things done.
Britain has voted to leave the European Union. Welcome to Brexit, day 1.
I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it. And I will do everything I can in future to help this great country succeed. Thank you very much.
Together, we will build a better Britain.
Good afternoon. Well, it's been a very, very busy first day for me here at the Foreign Office.
Was a young American. She was the young American. She was the young American.
What the hell is going on?
We are live in Brussels tonight. At least 30 dead and hundreds injured in 2 attacks.
Although they attack our way of life and they attack us because of who we are, we will never let them win.
Molenbeek, the once unknown suburb of Brussels, now seemingly the country's extremist heartland.
Within a few shocking, terrible minutes, a night of celebration turned into a night of horror.
Bodies were lying everywhere, crushed by the wheels of the truck. This is a truly terrible attack.
It's a dude? No, it's a sniper. It's a sniper? Watch out!
Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad.
Shoot the messenger.
We're going to build a great wall on the border. That's a good one.
This is a low-flying panic attack.
He's like a little baby.
The sound of sixpence that goes.
As Donald Trump put it so succinctly and articulately, what the hell is going on? Well, joining me now is the writer Bidisha, Juliet Samuel from the Telegraph newspaper, and the London-based Dutch journalist Joris Landik to discuss some of the major issues of 2016. Welcome to you all. We've got lots to unpack. We've got, only a few minutes to do it, so let's get cracking. Brexit and Trump, some people call it populism, other people call it the triumph of genuine grassroots democracy. Which is it, Juliet?
I think it's the year that the losers won. So people who had felt that every political major decision that was made was going against them suddenly found themselves on the winning side. I'm not sure populism is the right name for it, but I don't think that I yet have an alternative name.
What do you think?
I'd go along with that. What we've seen is the absolute triumph of sloganeering over policy making, of just saying anything, as long as it's catchy and memorable, over sitting down, looking at the real political process and thinking, what kind of change do we want? Why do we feel so disenfranchised? So it was a vote against the underdevelopment of cities, against the underinvestment in very basic things like healthcare and schools and all the rest of it, which went horribly the wrong way.
But the margins have also been quite tight, haven't they? I mean, in America, Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote, and Trump won the Electoral College by 79,000 votes in 3 states, which is not a landslide. And in this country, Brexit arguably was also quite a narrow margin. So if we talk about these sort of tectonic shifts, Joris, are we slightly missing the point?
Well, we could be. But I think what has become clear is that unless you vote for a bunch of racists, you will not be listened to. And so if you look across Europe, there are all these groups on the left, and here there's Corbyn, and they're being consistently ignored. If you want to be heard, don't vote for a left-wing, actually a well-argued alternative, because the left has a thought-out plan. Vote for the racist bullshitters. And then suddenly the elite will perk up. That's really depressing.
But why this anger? Because, I mean, in America, unemployment sank below 5% this year. Wage levels were going up for the first time since the recession. This country's economy is doing fairly well, too. So how do you explain this anger?
Well, although unemployment is very low, if you actually look at real wages in this country, we've had the biggest fall. I think in the last 10 years, wages have actually fallen 6%. That's the first time that this has happened in this country for about 80 or 90 years. So although on the face of it, things are doing fine, and actually we're doing OK as an economy, people don't feel that they have a route to aspiration, that their future is a bright one. So I think they felt pessimistic, and they felt like that they needed a change and things were going in the wrong direction.
There's been a lot of criticism of the liberal elite, of the metropolitan elite, which I guess includes all of us. Badisha, I mean, has the metropolitan elite been incredibly incompetent at putting its own point of view? Because they've been in a very sort of, you know, they've been in a rather cowed defensive position, haven't they?
I would very much have liked to have seen, during the whole Brexit campaigning, the left being much stronger about the importance of remaining. I was casting about, waiting for someone to say something that I could remember. And as you say, we're all involved in this world anyway. And yet that didn't happen. Instead, what we've seen over a long number of years, since the sort of new Labour, Blairite, sort of yuppie Labour, that Labour has kowtowed to the right. And in fact, instead of us saying, my God, 2016's been terrible, what we could say is, what we need to have happen now is the left solidifies, comes together, makes itself electable, puts forward its message in a way that's leftist, but that's strong, and then defends its position instead of going, yeah, no, I mean,
but it's hopelessly divided. And this country, the left is unbelievably divided between, you know, the Corbynites and the non-Corbynites.
This is something, and in fact, you've touched upon it very well. The left famously is very good at splitting off into many, many, many areas. The right is very good at coming together and then putting forward a message which may not be true at all, but they can shout it so loudly. OK, talking of shouting loudly, we have to talk about Donald Trump, of course. Who here predicted his victory? Did you, Joris? No. One word? No? Did you? No. Did you?
No, but I wasn't surprised.
You weren't surprised. OK, that's not good enough. We want a full prediction
I was
here.
not. No,
OK, so, but you were surprised, Joris?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we should be grateful that at least we got rid of the Clintons. I mean, here's someone who voted for the Iraq War, which is the single most defining disaster, and was very chummy with Goldman Sachs, who were at the heart of the other big disaster. So where was the Democratic Party? When they were thinking, OK, are we going to give our voters Bernie Sanders? No, let's just settle for this person. So the fact that we got rid of him, her, is a plus. Everything else is a disaster.
But the bigger question here is, you know, have the forces of autocracy won this year? I mean, it's Trump with his incredibly unapologetic, robust, red meat language. It's Erdogan in Turkey, Xi Jinping, I mean, with a kind of Maoist personality cult in China. Yeah. You've got Viktor Orban in Hungary, making no apologies whatsoever. I mean, and of course Brexit here. I mean, this is, you know, this is, but not that Brexit is autocratic, but autocratic leaders around Europe and in the United States, the world's greatest democracy, supposedly, are on the up. Why is that?
I think it's what happens in times of great uncertainty, as indeed Juliet alluded to. But I don't necessarily put Trump into that category because I don't think that he's politically sophisticated enough to be an autocratic leader. What's interesting about Trump is that to me, he's the drunk guy at the bar who shouts more and more the more you tell him to be quiet. So he wasn't even Hillary Clinton's opposite number. Clinton deserved an opposite number.
But he may not be sophisticated, but he's got the last laugh, hasn't he? Because he tapped into something that none of the other politicians managed to tap into.
The thing is, if you pass what he actually says, if you write it down in words, he rarely makes sense.
OK. Juliet, he tapped into something, didn't he?
Yes, he did. But I think, as you mentioned earlier, the margin... Hillary actually won the popular vote, and the margins was very small. And so... I mean, one way of looking at Trump is that you had a political elite that had been in power for a long time. Hillary Clinton represented that elite. And the longer someone is in power, the more the power does corrupt. And so people said, actually, we want to clear out that, and we're not scrutinising too hard the alternative. We just want to change. But so it's not necessarily a full endorsement.
But the question I have, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit, is I wonder if democracy has become a victim of its own success. People have, you know, taken stuff and even prosperity and the kind of peaceability of democracy for granted, and therefore you try out these experiments like Trump.
I think that you could look at it that way, that, you know, I heard someone saying recently that this is an affordability vote. But I think also that people, it's not just economics, though, is it? People felt culturally left behind, and they felt that things were being taken out of their control, out of their nation, and put in international remote organisations that they had nothing to do with. So it's not just an economic vote, it's also a cultural shift.
OK, I'm going to really bug you now with some predictions for next year. Joris, Marine Le Pen, President of France, yes or no?
I think ultimately not. What I'm sure of is that this is the year, the coming year is when Britain discovers that it has voted to leave an organisation it doesn't understand, for a future it hasn't examined, and that Brexit will mean what the EU decides it means. And that is a long way to go.
The EU is not very happy with the way Britain has been behaving over this so far.
Yeah, and Britain has voted to pit itself against a bloc of nations 5 times its size.
OK, Badisha, will Angela Merkel survive the latest
great question.
attack?
I respect her a huge amount. I very much hope that she does, because if she falls and Germany moves rightwards officially, then the rest of the EU, politically and ideologically, is in real trouble. So I hope that she prevails.
OK, very briefly, Juliet. Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, will the bromance continue, or will they fall out and will it have disastrous consequences?
I think it will continue, and it's one of the things I'm most worried about is Russia, an assertive, aggressive Russia being kowtowed to.
Run out of time. Juliet, Badisha, Joris, thanks for coming in. John.
After the break, some rare good news from 2016. After 40 years of trying, scientists say they have found a vaccine that offers 100% protection against Ebola. Welcome back. By the time it was over, the Ebola outbreak in West Africa had killed more than 11,000 people, many of them children and pregnant women. But results published today from a clinical trial in Guinea show a vaccine against Ebola was 100% effective at preventing the virus from spreading from person to person. Could mean that large outbreaks of this terrible disease may well be a thing of the past. A warning, this report from our science editor, Tom Clark, does contain some distressing images from the start.
The deadliest Ebola outbreak in history started in Guinea in December 2013. Undetected for 3 months, it quickly spread to neighbouring Sierra Leone and Liberia. Not containing the outbreak was one of the most high-profile failures in the history of the World Health Organization. By the time it was stamped out, Ebola had killed 11,300 people across West Africa. But today, the WHO celebrated a major triumph. A vaccine that should mean an end to future outbreaks.
What we have shown is that in the vaccinated people we have had 0 cases of Ebola, while at the same time we have had 23 cases in the people who were not vaccinated with Ebola. So you compare 0 to 23 and you can calculate, but you have a vaccine which has shown 100% efficacy.
Towards the end of the outbreak, WHO staff in Guinea worked in some of the most dangerous conditions to vaccinate more than 5,000 people. They used a method called ring vaccination to see if the medicine worked in the shortest space of time, according to the man who designed the trial.
We came up with a completely novel trial design, which meant that what we did is when a case occurred and was notified to the authorities, then we defined a ring around those cases, so they're close contacts and they're contacts of the contacts, and we vaccinated them and our design was that we vaccinate them either immediately or we came back and vaccinated them after 21 days. So they acted as a sort of control group.
The big lesson from the sorry tale of Ebola in West Africa is that vaccines for similarly deadly viruses like Marburg and Lassa fever should be developed in advance.
You don't want to be doing it in an outbreak, you can do it before, and so that's what we should be doing now, getting these vaccines through. And now, having done that, really designing the trials efficiently for when an outbreak does occur.
The experimental Ebola vaccine has already been used to stamp out a flare-up of Ebola in Sierra Leone in late 2015 and is now being fast-tracked past drug regulators, so it's ready to save lives next time the virus breaks out.
Tom Clark. Now, a reminder of that breaking news while we've been on air. A major diplomatic row is breaking out tonight after the Obama administration refused to exercise its veto at the UN Security Council to defend Israel. Applause broke out as the Council voted 14-0 in favour of a motion demanding an end to Israeli settlement building on occupied Palestinian lands. To Israeli anger, America abstained on the vote, saying the motion was consistent with US policy, quote. In the last few minutes, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations has attacked US abstention, saying the Trump administration will usher in a new era.
We're on the air with a Christmas Eve summary at 20 to 5 tomorrow, but for now, that's all.
That's Channel 4 News. Good evening and have a great Christmas.
Good evening.